This is People I Know Show, a podcast about interesting people, personal growth, and being wrong. I'm Curt Carstensen. This is episode number 43, and my guest today is my niece, Chloe Carstensen. This happens to be the fourth episode that I've had one of my nieces or nephews on. Episode 8 with my nephew, AJ Torfin, then episode 26 with his older sister, Michaela Torfin, and episode 37 with Chase Carstensen, who is the younger brother of Chloe, here in episode 43. I'm not a parent, I am an uncle, and I have a younger niece and a younger nephew as well. Being an uncle has been something that has influenced my life, and getting to know these kids as they've gotten older, and I interact with them in different ways and take them on their day for their birthday present every year. And that is the timing of this episode with Chloe, as we'll get into. She and Michaela and I returned recently from a trip to New York City. We'll get into a number of the things that we did in New York City and some of the ways that Chloe has and continues to influence me. And we'll get into a number of topics that could be considered controversial. Topics such as women's rights or feminism, LGBTQ issues, gun control. Chloe is someone that has been changing her mind, and she has viewpoints in some of these issues that she was very willing to share. Plus, considering Chloe's age and my age, a recognition I had as we had this conversation is hers and my perspective on 9/11 were very different. And we saw the 9/11 museum in New York. And also, the era I grew up and the era she grew up had a very different perspective on school shootings. And we get into that as well as the personal growth segment and the being wrong segment today. Check the links in the show notes to get to the People I Know Show Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube pages so you can see some photos of Chloe and I. Now, let's get into my conversation, recorded this week via Skype with my 18-year-old niece, Chloe Carstensen. I welcome my niece, Chloe Carstensen, to the podcast today. Hi, Chloe. How are you?
I'm good, Curt. How are you?
I'm doing well. I haven't seen you since, I suppose, Monday. We're recording this just a couple days after our 5-night trip. We went, you and I and your cousin Michaela, who I've also had on a previous episode, episode 26 of People I Know Show. The three of us went for the annual outing that I take all my nieces and nephews on. But this year was the biggest one yet. We went on a trip to New York City to celebrate your 18th birthdays, which happened in the last couple months, and also graduating from high school. And that was a pretty big thing for me, just to take you two girls across the country and spend that much time with you. Having a couple days to look back on that trip, what really stands out to you as maybe the biggest memories from our 5-day trip at New York City?
The Book of Mormon. That show was hilarious, and it was just really well done. Since it was just, that was like the main thing that I wanted to do, was to see a Broadway show, and so I'm really glad that I got to see a Broadway show, especially The Book of Mormon, because it made me laugh so much and so hard. It was a really funny show, and it was really good too.
And that was on the Sunday night, the final night of the trip, so I think that was probably a pretty good way to wrap up the trip for you, and we can talk more about musicals and theater. We can get into that in a little bit, because I know that's a big part of your life. What else from the trip that maybe you weren't looking as forward to as much, but were quite pleased with certain things that we did and how it turned out?
I really liked going to the Met. I was already looking forward to that because I really like museums and going to museums, especially art museums. But I really like the Met, especially the fact that they had my favorite artist, Edgar Degas. They had a little section of a lot of his works, especially his famous sculpture, The 14-Year-Old Dancer. So I was really happy about that. And I was talking to my mom that they had a lot of his paintings and the sculpture there, and she was just like, oh, lucky. And so I was really glad to go to the Met.
Yeah, the Met, I had not been there before. I'd been to New York 2 previous times, had not been to the Met, and I just found that place to be so enormous with just artifacts and art from so many different cultures and eras that, to me, it's a bit overwhelming. It's like, I don't really know what to do with all this. I would look at it. It would seem so interesting and fascinating, but then I just kind of had to keep walking, because if you don't keep walking, you'll just not see almost anything because it's so huge. But I think the part of that I enjoyed the most was probably when I got to the contemporary art and just seeing the more vibrant colors and some of the paintings that I was more familiar with. I thought was my favorite part of the Met. We did so many things, Chloe. Is there more that you really, you feel like after a few days you might think back on as some weeks and months past as being memorable in addition to the things you've already mentioned?
I would say the top of the rock, because, well, like the pictures that we took up there, it looks like it was photoshopped because we were so high up and the view was very clear. So that was really cool. And then also the Statue of Liberty and visiting Ellis Island, like seeing all the different components that like brought that the immigration process back then put forth, and like what these immigrants back then also had to endure afterwards too. I thought that was really cool too.
Of all the museums that we went to showcasing different histories, we went to a few different things. I thought I was most surprised with how much I enjoyed being at Ellis Island and how well they presented that. I found that to be a place, that was probably the one place where I wish I had more time, whereas the other ones, it kind of got exhausting to go through, because I think it was smaller. I felt like this is reasonable. I could maybe get through this, but we had other things we wanted to accomplish that day, so we didn't spend quite as much time there as I probably needed to get through it all. But that would be a place, as we talk about this, and for the People I Know show audience, those are some of the highlights for your future trips to New York, just to remember that. And I think I had one other thing that I thought really surprised me, Chloe, was when we went on the cruise. I think we started at 7 o'clock. We finished at 9 o'clock. So for an early August evening, that was the perfect time to both get the southern part of Manhattan during the daylight and then get it during the nighttime on our return. And I thought some of the photos we got and just seeing the city both daytime and nighttime and being on the water with the temperature was pretty good and comfortable. I thought that was something that people on a trip to New York that you should consider doing.
Yeah. A lot of those museums were just so big. Like, as I've said before, I really like museums, but at one point I was almost getting tired of a few of them too.
Yeah, I'm not, like when I'm at home, I don't go to the museums in the Twin Cities area that often because I guess that's not necessarily my thing. Maybe that's a bit more of your thing. But when I travel, I do like to take advantage of that because there's so much history that is taking place and put into one spot. So to spend a few hours just kind of wandering around and reading some things and maybe doing an audio tour when those are available, just it's an opportunity to really learn a lot. And that's from my travel experiences, just recognizing that I should take advantage of that. For this, though, for you, Chloe, I know you've done some traveling, but how did going to New York City compare to your past travels? And is there anything you learned from it? Now, maybe the next time you won't have a parent or an uncle with you and you're going to have to do some of these things on your own?
Well, the only other two cities that you could kind of compare New York to that I've visited is Chicago and Boston. And just New York City overall was just a whole different playing field with the fact that it's like truly like a melting pot. Like, I don't really know if I heard anyone around me like speak English throughout the trip, like that were just passing by, which was weird for me because even when I'm in Chicago or Boston, I still heard a lot of English speakers, but in New York it was like Spanish, French, like any language you could think of, you could hear getting spoken.
And then definitely a few occasions when there's a language that we probably had no idea what it was being spoken, and that's just a part of the ambiance of New York City. So the next time you go on a trip like this, perhaps it's in New York City, maybe it's some foreign major city, do you feel like you've learned some things about getting around in New York City? Because I managed that, and that's something that was a learning curve for me the first few times that I had done it. But having the experience with some of the metro transit systems and subways and city buses, I had very little issue navigating us through New York this time. Do you think you're ready to handle that on your own the next time it comes up for you?
Yeah, I think I could probably figure it out. It might take me like a trip or two, but I think I would eventually get the hang of it.
Yeah, that's one of those things that for people that haven't traveled a lot, it's a learning curve, and you're going to make a few mistakes. I know I have, but hopefully they're not too big of mistakes and you can figure out the mistake you made and just go the other direction or whatever it takes to correct itself. And these days with Google Maps, for instance, you tell the app where you're wanting to go and it tells you precisely how to get there, which trains to take, how many stops it'll make, and how long it'll take, and how to find the connecting train. It really makes it easy. So I don't know what people used to do, but I guess I don't have to worry about that right now with the cities that I've been to and the ones I tend to go to. Chloe,
yeah.
Each week on the podcast, I make an emphasis of having someone on that has influenced my life. And when I think to some of the things that you've had an influence on me is, in a big part, going back to, you mentioned Book of Mormon, which you attended on the final night of our trip. The fact that you have this passion for theater and for musicals. I know, of course, a couple of years ago, we saw Wicked as a musical when it came to the Twin Cities. And that's something that prior to you coming of age and getting involved and me seeing some of your performances in school, that's really a type of thing I wouldn't go to. But knowing that you were so big into it, it started to introduce me to that world, and I'm learning. It's not necessarily my thing yet, but I do have a greater appreciation for it. Explain to me how and why it is so important to you.
So, on my mom's side of the family, we're just a huge, musical family. We love to sing, and so I think that's where, Chase and I really get our love for music and that whole area of culture. And my mom used to do musicals when she was in high school, and she would tell me how much fun she would have in them and how much she missed them too. And so when I was in 7th grade, the summer of 7th grade, I joined this summer youth theater program, and they were doing Little Mermaid Junior. And although I didn't get a main role or something, I still had so much fun. Since I was a backup seagull, it was such a fun role to be in, and it was just fun to be on stage. And I love just singing and dancing and just being around the people that are also in theater too, because it's such a great group of people to be around.
And you just wrapped up your final performance during your pre-college years just a couple weeks ago. Explain what that was like, having that final performance. And I guess from there, is there going to be more performing in your future?
Well, I don't really know if I'll be doing any shows during college. That'll just, if I do happen to get involved in a show, I happen to get involved in a show. But the show that I just recently wrapped up on was the high school edition or version of Chicago, and it was such a fun show to be a part of. I just really enjoyed it, and it was also really cool that the theater across the street from the Book of Mormon was holding Chicago, so I would just look over and I would see the marquee for Chicago, and I was like, oh, I was just in that show. But I was really happy for that to be my final show for my high school years. And also, it was really nice. There was a few people from different schools this year that joined it, and I was really glad to meet them and like be a part of a cast with them too. And I just can't wait to also, with the possibility of my brother joining theater now, to see what the future shows bring, because that'll just be really exciting to like be able to watch the shows and not be a part of them. It'll just be a super cool, different perspective.
And I'll have to make a few more appearances and try to continue to learn and appreciate that, because as you're very aware of, most of the rest of the family, at least my part of the family and my upbringing, it's always been sports, and pretty much always sports. So when the arts and theater start kind of being a thing, that was a transition, I think, for more people in the family than just me. But I know because you've been so passionate about it and given us plenty of opportunities to see what you've been doing, that is making an impact, I think, on many people in the family. So that's been an influence probably beyond me and just to others in the family as well. So that I'd imagine for you just doing that and seeing all of us come to your performances when we're able to, that must mean something to have the support in the audience.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, it's always really nice to see like Grandma Gail and Grandpa Wayne come up for like usually for my Sunday performances. And it's also really nice to like, because my mom, she'll always try to come to at least every single one of my performances, because that's what she would have want for her when she was my age in shows, because she like her parents, she told me like she said that she wished that they would have gone to every single performance, even though she was happy they went to at least one, but she said that she wanted them to come like every single night. And so she'll come to every performance, and then she'll sometimes like tell me, well, this was different from like the night before, so you must have gotten a note on it or something must have happened. And I'm just like, yep, thanks for noticing that. It's just really nice to see all these different people that like is for our side of the family that probably wouldn't really have gone to a show if it hadn't been for me, maybe, and going to the shows and supporting me.
And I encourage anyone who hasn't spent much time in a theater watching, there's really talented people, and really no matter if it's a high level performance or maybe it's just community members or high schoolers or elementary school, just the effort that it takes to building the set and make everything move smoothly and learning the parts, it is something to be appreciated. And the fact that, like, even for you probably perform three straight days on a weekend, and the people that are performing in, say, the Book of Mormon, they're doing it several times a week, basically every day for months. That it's just an entirely different world.
8 shows a week.
Oh, that it seems so difficult, and it's probably almost precise most of the time. But if someone were to go several times, they're going to notice some little things that do change for whatever reason, I suppose, and that takes a keen eye as everyone on stage is trying to perfect themselves, and so there's a chance things get a little bit better, a little bit different as they continue on with the performance, and that's just something I hadn't really considered until spending time watching you and just learning about your passion. Another way that you've influenced me is we've had these annual birthday outings that we've been doing for a few years. 2 times now, Chloe, is about a year ago and maybe 3 or 4 years ago, you have decided that for your birthday present from me that you get to choose, that you wanted to see Taylor Swift in concert. So I've been to 2 Taylor Swift concerts with you. We've been together. And I actually surprised the first time how much I enjoyed it. And the second time again, I had a good time. And that is another influence on me, Chloe. I'd never envisioned going to see Taylor Swift perform in concert, much less twice. I've barely seen anyone twice, but I've seen her twice. So thank you for that. And why has she been someone that you wanted to see on multiple occasions?
I've liked her music since I was like 3 or 4 years old. Like, I remember the moment I was in my mom's like old Malibu and our song came on, and I was like, I think 4 years old, and I just was listening to her, heard the song, and that became my favorite song. And I told my mom, I'm pretty sure, I'm like, this is going to be like my favorite artist for now. And then I'm like, she's still my favorite artist, and I'm 18 years old. So she's like her music has helped me like go through stuff. Like when I'm sad, like she'll have songs for that. When I'm happy and just am in an upbeat mood and just want to like dance around my room, she has songs for that too. So I just like her songs, and I also like the artistry she has too. Like we've seen in the shows, she's a great performer.
Yeah, the performances in these big arena shows, whether or not necessarily someone's big into that individual performer's music is one thing, but regardless of that, the sights and sounds of the theatrics and the pyrotechnics and everything that's presented is, if someone hasn't been to a show like that, I think you might not realize what goes on there. It's an entire show. It's not somebody singing. Sometimes you go to concerts and it's just someone or the band just kind of singing, and there's not a whole lot behind it. And to me, that's kind of boring. I'd rather just like listen on the radio and do something else. And in some cases, I've felt like that. But for a show like Taylor Swift, they really have a lot of cool things happening. And it is a show in addition to the songs that are sung.
Yeah. I love like watching all of her dancers too. Like all of her, like everyone that's in her shows are just really talented. Especially Reputation. Like that was a really good concert.
Will you be attending future Taylor Swift concerts when she comes back to Minneapolis, whether or not I am the person to go with you?
Well, my roommate, or I think potential roommate, one thing that we have in common is that we're both huge Taylor Swift fans, so I'm pretty sure I'll have someone to go to a Taylor Swift concert with.
So I'll be off the hook this time if I'm not available, for instance?
Yeah.
Okay.
You'll be all good.
That reminds me, though, the second time we went, I thought it was a fun story because we had planned it. You knew that we were going. I told you I'd got some tickets. You had no idea anything about these tickets. Can you remember what it was like that day, not knowing what tickets we had?
Yeah. Since I was just thinking, though, they're just like in the normal seating, I was thinking we could just go through one of the normal entrances because we got there like relatively early, if I remember correctly. So some of the lines were still pretty short to get in. But then I was like, why can't we go over there? And then you're like, no, I think our entrance is all the way down there. And so we got to the entrance for like the security that said floor seating. And I'm like, are we sitting on the floor? And like you showed the guards like the phone, and they're like, okay, you can go through. And after we got out, I was like, are we sitting on the floor? And you're just like, I don't know, are we? And I was thinking, I may have my dumb moments, but I'm pretty sure we're sitting on the floor. But then I also had no idea where we were sitting on the floor. And so we got all the way down, and then we were towards the back, and you're like, is this good? And I was like, yeah, I was like, it's great. And then we got like towards the middle, and then you're like, okay, is this good? And I was like, yeah, this is perfect. And then you kept walking, and then we got onto like the side of the stage, and then we were like probably only like a couple rows away from the actual main stage, and you're like, oh, these are our seats. And I was just in shock because, like, I knew, first of all, her tickets are very hard to get, and then they can also be pretty pricey too. And so when we were just on the floor, I thought, well, like, just even being on the back, I would have been fine with that. But the fact that we were, like, pretty much right by the stage, I was just blown away. So it was even cooler because I got to see her, like, really, like, up close and, like, in person.
That was, yeah, every once in a while I'm kind of tricky, and I try to surprise someone when I can. And I thought that was a good opportunity to surprise you, and it sounds like that worked, and
Yeah.
it's a pretty good memory for you.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised.
All right, Chloe, let's get into some other topics that I feel like you've either influenced me some already, but if not so much yet, there's a chance for you to influence me, or perhaps someone that's hearing us speak today. Is I've noticed over the past few years, you become passionate about a number of issues, and you being someone that's occasionally soft-spoken or perhaps shy in a lot of settings, there's certain settings where I've heard you and seen you become much more vocal because you're passionate about some other areas. So I'd like to open the floor, per se, to you to bring up a couple things that you feel that you've learned about and you'd like to influence some other people's thinking on what you've learned and what you believe.
Well, I'm actually wearing a shirt that's kind of from a movement that I greatly support, which is like the women's rights movement. It says, "I am a vital voice," which my mom gave to me for Christmas. So shout out to my mom for giving me a shirt related to something I'm passionate about. But, like, over my high school years, I was kind of trying to figure out what I really was into, like a self-discovery. I got really into politics and, like, several issues relating to, like, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, and, well, more recently, gun control, and just, I've gotten really into researching about politics and trying to learn more about the different aspects that create and mold our environment, or social environment. So take women's rights, for instance, which impacts me personally with the facts, like, in some countries, women, like in Saudi Arabia, a woman was just given the right to travel on her own, which is very scary to think about that. But, like, here in America, with the facts that, like, sexual assault and, like, rape, with, like, the Me Too movement, with how the victims are portrayed, and then, like, how the person who committed the act against them is portrayed, like, with how sometimes, like, we all saw with Brock Turner, how he got a 6-month sentence, but then got off, like, halfway through his sentence due to good behavior when he raped a woman, like, behind a garbage can, like, something that will traumatize her forever. And he was a white male who got off. And we saw with the Me Too movement about all the celebrities coming forward about their experiences too, and it's just very, like, it's almost hard to realize how many people have actually experienced it in some shape or form and how it's affected them. And you also see, like, the strength in these people, like men and women both, who come forward, like Terry Crews coming forward to talk about his experiences with being sexually assaulted and how brave they are. Like, it shouldn't, the whole idea behind feminism, which would have been a better wording than women's rights, but the whole idea behind feminism is equality, And it's typically the feminists that actually advocate for men to get prosecuted correctly, and also like men who are victims of sexual violence to get what like the help they need and like the support they need. Like it's very unsettling to see the world that we live in, where people who have to go through this kind of emotional trauma get belittled for it more than get help instead. So that's one thing that I'm really passionate about. And then like in New York, when we saw the Stonewall Inn, where that was basically kind of like the start of Pride, like that was just really cool to see too, because Pride is something that still goes on today, because it's still an ongoing debate. Like we can all see now with like trans people getting banned from the military, which is ridiculous and stuff. Like the LGBTQ still has to like demand for their rights, which is ridiculous, but it's just the reality that we live in now. So it's just a plethora of issues that I've gotten myself more and more into and want to advocate for.
And with those two issues, Chloe, I'll speak first on the feminism and women's rights and maybe how it relates to sexual violence. Is there's a shift. The Me Too started a shift where I think a lot of people that just never thought about it, maybe guys that haven't committed a crime or maybe borderline kind of have or just are unsure of it, I think it brings awareness to some people of what, okay, I want to make sure that whatever I'm involved with, that I get consent, because maybe at some point in history, the consent wasn't needed. It was assumed or something. And in addition, just the fact that in some circles, not only was consent apparently not needed, at least from men's perspective, that they would be laughed about or joked about or bragged about whatever someone might have done to a woman. And that's kind of the culture that allows for instance, you mentioned this Brock Turner, which was, I forget what university on the West Coast where this happened. And the judge, because he came from this good family and had this good future ahead of him, just wanted to let him off the hook without much of a penalty, whereas someone else committing a similar crime somewhere else may have gotten a much more severe penalty. Or in some cases, a lot of these types of crimes go without prosecution because it's a he said, she said type of thing. And it seems like the men get the benefit of the doubt in so many cases.
Yeah.
And
we can also see that with our president too, with the recent allegations of him potentially even like sexually assaulting a child, which is just disturbing in all regards, to think that we have someone, the person who's supposed to represent America, who potentially sexually assaulting or whatever to a child. Like, that's disturbing. Like, and then there's a lot of people who will come in and defend him, but they can't. Like, it almost seems like a lot of the times the men will be defended, will get the defense and like the support that they shouldn't get or like deserve, but the victims get pushed to the side or will get talked down to when they're the ones who have to deal with like the trauma of going through an event like that.
I think what hopefully is happening, the best phrase that comes to my mind is the old adage of where there's smoke, there's fire, where a lot of the times with these sorts of accusations, there would be plenty of smoke, but somehow it would be ignored that, well, it didn't actually happen that way. Nothing happened. No big deal. Where now I'd hope, even though not in all cases clearly yet, but the trend is moving in a direction where if there's smoke, if there's enough reasonable evidence that something took place, that it's not going to be ignored perhaps or dismissed in the same way that it had been in the past. And with anything, and you mentioned the Stonewall Inn with gay rights and LGBTQ, it's still not perfect. It's still, I would say, there's many reasons why there isn't equality for that segment of the population. But compared to 50 years ago when the Stonewall riots happened, enormous progress has been made. Not that we want anything to take another 50 years in any realm that needs to be improved, but the fact is that things do take time sometimes, and maybe some generations that more prominently think one way, maybe when they lose power or pass on, new generations are able to create and allow for movements to change. It's unfortunate things take so long, but it seems to be the reality in some of these situations that things don't happen quickly all the time. That's a problem, I think, but it's something we at least need to be aware of. There needs to be continued progress, and hopefully quick progress, but at least progress.
Yeah. I only hope for more progress to happen in all regards to with feminism and the LGBTQ rights, and also just rights to minorities too, because it's, even though a lot of people don't believe that racism may not exist in America anymore, it's still very apparent in a lot of regards, as I've said before to many of my friends when I discuss this kind of stuff with them. People in office are getting caught with having racist pasts or racist trends, and that's disturbing too, because America is supposed to be a melting pot. That's kind of what makes us unique in a way, which we saw in New York. It's just, we're supposed to be a melting pot country, yet we can't accept multiple, some people can't accept multiple ideas and just different perspectives from others. They're just dead set on one, which stinks, but there's nothing you can really do to change a person. So there's only so far you can go to try to open their eyes and broaden their horizons to different possibilities.
The purpose of this podcast, People I Know Show, as it's transpired now to episode 43 with you, Chloe, is the fact that different people and different ideas have influenced my thinking, and I think it's powerful to talk to these people and share their stories, and then demonstrate, as we'll get to, ways that individuals focus on personal growth and things that individuals claim that they were wrong about, because this is all about influence on me influencing others, of ways to possibly reconsider something. And I know that when I have conversations like this, not every topic, not every issue is going to connect with everybody, but I'd hope that some of the ideas exchanged here can be a safe space for someone to take a listen to two people talking about a topic, and not for someone listening, not need to engage necessarily with that conversation right away. Just think about it. Just think about, is there any way that the way I think about this could be changed? Am I definitely sure that I think about this correctly? That's a process I go through really as often as possible, because if there's one thing I'm certain of, it's that things that I think I'm right about right now, there's some of these things that I think I'm right about, I'm not right about. But if I can say that, and I can say that with confidence, everybody needs to do that too, because there's always going to be some gaps in our logic and gaps in our knowledge and understanding. And I just would hope that people having conversations about topics that might be controversial doesn't need to be end in an argument, but instead it can just be an exchange of ideas and perspectives with respect to the fact that everyone's lived their own experience. And maybe sometimes someone's experience has lacked some opportunity that someone else's has that gained them a different perspective, and just being willing to listen to what someone else has said or learned. And I'd imagine just kind of watching you grow the last few years, knowing that you become more outspoken on some of these things. You've gone through a process like that for yourself of changing perspectives.
Yeah, I definitely have a different viewpoint and perspective from what I did like when I first started high school.
And how did that all come to be? What was it like being someone that's mind is changing and adapting to new information? And that's a part of education, is you learn new things, and hopefully what you're being taught is correct as best we can know. But regardless, when you're opening yourself to learning new things, the mind's going to change a little bit in some cases. Usually for most people, what was that like for you?
It was almost like confusing because I thought that I was supposed to think a certain way because I was raised to be in a conservative household, and I held to a lot of those ideas. Like, well, my mom was pretty progressive, and both my parents are actually pretty progressive for being conservative. So, like, I wasn't like alt-right, but I still had a lot of conservative viewpoints. Like, at one point I was pro-life, which has completely changed, where I'm very much pro-choice and believe that a woman should have the right to choose what she wants to do with her body, which is a highly controversial topic, and I have family members who will debate with me on that, and a lot of it is now like more friendly because I know what the other perspectives like, because I used to hold that viewpoint, but my mind changed because I realized that although I wasn't being congruent with me claiming to be a feminist, yet I was pro-life because I was wanting equality, but a man doesn't really need to have, like, doesn't need a law to be passed or a ruling by the Supreme Court to be put in place for him to choose whether or not he can get, like, a certain procedure done for him. So that's when I started to shift my viewpoint on that. And also, like, I had someone from my family take me to Unplanned, and although it didn't change my mind on what I believed with between pro-life, pro-choice, it opened my eyes up to a whole different perspective of someone who used to work for Planned Parenthood. So it was, like, in some ways, I think it's almost a good thing that at one point I was conservative, and also that I'm raised in a conservative household, so I can always get the different perspective on the different issues involving, like, the economy and politics and such.
And I went through a similar process, and at this point, I don't know if I even identify as any one thing in particular. I really try to keep an open mind whenever possible, knowing that some of my ideas I've thought through greatly and I'm really confident in, but sometimes we believe things, we think things, that's just because that's what we grew up with, or that's what someone influenced us at a certain point. And then because it's a human nature thing to want to, like, be right, and that's something that's been hard for me to get over, and, like, being okay with being wrong, we try to, like, defend whatever we think so commonly. Not everyone always, I suppose, but it is, like, proven science based on what I read and listen about and understand that people tend to, they cherry pick the things that make their current stance more correct. Whether or not it actually is in any way, that's what we do as humans. Maybe it's like a survival technique or something, but it doesn't mean that whatever we think is right. So it's a difficult process of changing, and knowing that there's always people around you that are going to be agreeing with you and disagreeing with you, and then navigating that's a very difficult thing. And I understand why it's sometimes easier not to like change your mind. But I guess for me and maybe for you, it's just you feel compelled to do it. And then you start getting some new ideas and having to deal with the aftermath.
Yeah. Like, I've also experienced, like, this almost sounds kind of ridiculous, but it's been, I think I was telling you this earlier, and I was talking to my mom about this too, and my other family members, since I work up at my grandparents' farm. I was like, it's been a year since I first went vegan, but then I went vegetarian because it was easier for my mom to make meals for me, since all she would have to do is take out meat. But it's been a year since since I've last ate meat. Like, I haven't like ate meat for a whole year, which in our culture today, like, that is almost heard of, especially how I was raised too, where we would always have like meat in every meal that we had. But I think the one thing about being a vegetarian is that I've learned that I can get my protein and what I need that I would usually get from meat from other sources. So that's another thing that I have gotten a different perspective on, which that I've also kind of gotten a little bit teased about. Like, Chase, my brother, still teases me to this day about like different aspects about my diet. Like today, when my grandma was making chicken salad, he was like asking me like, are you going to eat that? And then my aunt asked me like what it's like to not eat meat and if I ever missed it. And I just told her, I'm like, honestly, at this point, I don't really feel a difference, well, I do feel better for some reason. Like, after I cut out meat, I felt healthier, but I don't miss meat at all, which when I first started, there were days where I would smell chicken, I would start craving it, my mouth would start watering. But now I don't really care for any of that anymore, which is very weird to think, since I used to be a super big foodie where I would eat a bunch of different types of food because I love food and I love to eat, but I love being a vegetarian because it's opened me to different styles of cooking and different ways to get your protein. And so in that sense, it introduced me to a whole different cuisine almost, and palate.
I have some friends that are vegetarians and a few that are vegans, and I know you've said that that's the path that you intend on taking once you're totally in control of your meals more than you were living at home, because as we'll get into this, you'll be going off to university soon. But being around people that are vegetarian and vegans, I feel like I would eat healthier if I was around these people more often, but I still have these old habits, the habits that you've been able to move past with the eating meat. I have those habits, and I do see at some point with different influences that probably less and less of that. But it's a challenge. That's the way I was raised, like you were raised, and I guess I'm not quite as compelled as you are to move away from it yet. But I do. Yeah. I'm someone I would never tease you. I support you doing whatever it is that you desire, Chloe, and I think that's a path that's certainly as good as any. And I'm proud of you for doing that. And as we're talking about these things, Chloe, I recognize that you have changed a lot the last few years, it seems like. But you're entering the stage of your life now, whether or not you realize it, where you're going to be exposed to all kinds of different things as you head off to the University of Minnesota for the next 3 years, perhaps 4 years. And I know you have other ambitions as well. So who knows if you'll definitely be there that entire time. But wherever you go, these next few years of your life, I think for a lot of people are like the really big years where you start to make all kinds of new friends and experience all kinds of different things and whatever that will be for you. So I can't imagine what it'll be in a few years, what you'll be like in a few years if you keep changing at the rate and that you have the last few years, Chloe.
Yeah, it's crazy to it's just crazy to think that in the next couple weeks I'm going to be moving into a dorm and going to college. Like, that's just almost unreal for me. And I've already actually made a few friends at orientation, and so at least I know I'll have people to talk to when I go to college. But it's exciting, but it's also very nerve-wracking to go to a college, even though it's just an hour away from home. It's still scary because I'm still going to be pretty much living on my own.
Yeah, I experienced that a number of years ago. It's a long time now for me. I suppose it was the fall of 2001 for the first time, the year you were born, that I experienced going off to college for the first time. But I guess at that time I wasn't far away from home, and mom and dad were a phone call away, and I probably called them quite a bit back then, just as I learned to be on my own. But then again, I would still come home most weekends and have my mom do the laundry, or grandma, my mom. And that was something that I had to break that habit as well. And I know you had ambitions for maybe going to school further away. You ended up being relatively close to your home. What, describe for me once again, and for the people I know show audience, what it is you're pursuing at the University of Minnesota, and what at this point you see your education turning into. What do you want to do with your life, Chloe? So
I'm going into global studies, which is basically international relations, and my focus is going to be on the Middle East. So I'm learning Arabic actually within my first semester. I'm starting to take Arabic, which I'm really excited about, and I plan on, after I get my bachelor's degree, to move on to law school. Maybe I'll get my master's in something, but I'm planning on moving on to law school and get a degree in international law.
That sounds very ambitious, but I know you're very smart and capable, and I'd imagine that you will succeed along that path, or any other slight alteration to the path that you'd make along the way. As you might find out, it's not uncommon for people to change their mind about something within college about what they're pursuing. Yeah. But I wouldn't be surprised if you stuck to it either, as these are decisions that are very hard to make at the age that they expect people to make these decisions. But I think you are someone that is fairly confident in what you're doing. Yeah, it was, since I just love learning in general. When I was talking to my career counselor at the school, she's like, well, what classes do you like? I'm like, well, I like math, science, band and choir, English too. I like literature, but then I also like Model UN and stuff like that. And she's like, okay, you're gonna have to end up choosing one major, you know that, right? And I was like, yep, I know, but I have no idea what it's going to be. So it was a process trying to figure out what major that I tend to pursue first, which one would be the correct one for me. Well, I wish you the best on that, and I'm sure you'll learn pretty quickly how much you like it, or if you need to make a tweak in some way. And Chloe, as we were talking about that when I started college, it reminded me that as we kind of tie this back to our New York trip before we get to the personal growth segment, it reminded me that you and your cousin Michaela and I were at the 9/11 Museum and Memorial in New York on our first day there.
Yeah.
And I didn't really think about it much until we were there, that I experienced this. I remember it was my first week or two of my first year of college at Alexandria Technical College. I remember the moment that I first learned that something had happened, and then I got on the phone with my sister, and then I was on the phone all day and watching the news coverage, and I don't know if I've ever been more addicted to like news media coverage in my life than that day and those first few days, just watching this happening and trying to understand what it meant and just not being able to pull myself away from the TV that day. Meanwhile, you were, what, 2 months old?
Yeah, exactly 2 months old. I turned 2 months old that day. So, my mom told me that she was holding me, and like when it happened, she just held me tighter, and like I think she called my dad, or my dad had called her or something like that. But there was a phone call made. I can't remember who it was from, but like she watched the TV and she was just holding me while she watched the buildings collapse. And apparently the day 9/11 happened, my AP history teacher, Mr. Weibel, was talking about how they were watching it in this one teacher's room, like everyone was. And even though I was only 2 months old when it happened, the whole museum and the memorial still, it almost made me cry, like get over, just, it was a whole bunch of emotions, and it was just crazy to see all the experiences that these people had to go through, and then like seeing the different victims' faces, and like different things that they cherished too, and it was just crazy to like go through that memorial and that museum and just see like the different things that from that day and what came out of it too.
And it just goes to show that, yes, we can go to the American Museum of Natural History or the Met and just see this history laid out from centuries ago from all parts of the world. And we look at that as history. But then we went to that museum, and the history, like I lived through that history. You were alive, but didn't really live through that history because you didn't have a memory of it. History is happening all the time, and we all have a different perspective of it, but that's a rare case where the history was so recent that you and I can be 18 years apart in age, and our perspective of that historical piece is so different until we walk in to the museum and we get to experience a lot of it together. But although still then I could picture some of these things that I'm learning about again and how I first learned about it, like the day of it happening. And for some of that, I'm sure it was you learning it for the first time.
Yeah, like, the facts, I just thought it was the two big towers that collapsed, but then I found out the hotel collapsed too. Like, it was not just those two buildings, it was like 7 buildings. Like, just some of those details that I didn't realize were a thing. And then I knew about the Pentagon, and I knew that they thought that they were aiming like either for like the White House or the Capitol, the one plane that went down near Camp David, but I didn't really I didn't know. I think someone told me at one point, but I might have forgotten. I don't know why I would forget this though, that like people, when the Twin Towers were burning up, that they just decided to jump to their deaths instead, which I could hardly watch that part of the museum because it was just really painful to watch, because it was like these people knew that they were going to die no matter what, and so they chose to rather fall to their deaths than get burned up alive.
And it's horrific and it's awful, but you see what's happening there, and I think there was a quote on the wall about just someone that witnessed this, and they had this in like a separate room that they warned you that the content in here was extraordinarily like tough to see. And there was a quote that someone that witnessed this happen with their own eyes said, out of respect to this person that so calmly was about to jump, I didn't look away because this is what her life had led to, that she had to make this choice in this moment. And so she didn't look. This person onlooking said that she felt out of respect that she shouldn't look away. And who knows the right or wrong in that situation, but just it's something that's forgotten from that day, that, you know, for some of the people that survived initially, that they didn't have a choice still. And I don't know. It's just the whole thing is, and even us talking about it now, I don't know what emotions that brings for people listening. It's not a pleasant subject, but again, it's a part of history, and not all of history. And unfortunately, a lot of history isn't pleasant to talk about, but to ignore it, I suppose, is not a necessarily the right approach either. And I think I have one more topic, Chloe, that something we had talked about in regards to history that we can get into briefly is, I am of the history that I could go to school and never give a thought to there being a school shooting, because that didn't happen when I was going to school, and started happening only, I think, after I was done with college did I start to see these types of things. I guess, you know, this did happen the first time in 1999. I take that back. And I was in school, but it was still an unusual, rare thing. And that conversation, the preparedness didn't reach where I was going to school in central Minnesota. We weren't like getting prepared for that as far as I know, but you going to school a decade and 2 decades later with so many school shootings all the time, it seems, your school experience was much different than mine. History changed in a drastic way that you have a great perspective on, and I don't. So what is that?
Well, it's scary, almost like, I can't remember if it was 2 years ago or something, but I think there was like a conflict between like a rehearsal and an active shooting drill with the staff, because they had to have the whole building cleared out, but the staff, like the teachers, like everyone at the school, have to now be trained for events like this, which it's really sad. And we have lockdown drills more often than we used to, actually, now that I think of it, because I think when I was in kindergarten, we only had like 1 or 2 within the year, and now we have like 2 per trimester when I was in high school. And that's just, it's very saddening to think about that, because like it's not something you would want to happen, and you would wish that there would be action taken upon it, but it's just something that just keeps happening, and there's been pretty much nothing done about it. And I remember in 8th grade when we were running the mile in gym, and there was someone who had committed a crime that we had to go into like an actual lockdown for. And so we went into the locker room, and we were in there for like an hour and a half, not knowing that the school had called my gym teacher, but she didn't get the call for some reason. And so there are a bunch of girls crying and stuff. And so then since we didn't hear the bell for some reason too, when we heard the band kids get out of class, we just heard a bunch of footsteps, and we all started to like panic because we had no idea what it was, and there were girls crying. And like, for some reason, when there's like traumatic events that happen to me, like for example, when I got hit by a minivan, I didn't cry. Like, I'm usually pretty calm in situations like that, so I was like comforting like the people around me that were crying, like it's gonna be okay. And we found out, actually, wait, it was in 7th grade, not 8th grade, but I think someone had to like come to the locker room and say, "You can get out now." And we were all just like, "You gotta be kidding me." We were all panicked and like scared it felt like almost nothing. But I'm glad we have those kind of drills, but it's also really sad that we have those kind of drills. Like one of my choir teacher who just recently retired, he talked about this when we had a recording, and we got into a lockdown drill, and he was talking about how sad it is that we have to do these kind of drills nowadays, and that he hopes that our generation will be the one that changes this kind of environment for the better, because it is really sad to think that you have to be scared about going to school because of the potential threat of a school shooter and stuff like that. Like, there was a threat that happened at my school. It was found to be like not like substantial, but we did get a day off of school because of that, which I think some people were happy about, but like I wasn't really happy about. But like at the same time, I was glad that they were taking those precautionary measures to make sure that it wasn't a liable threat, and so that they were protecting the students, but also making sure that there wasn't too much impact to the school too. So it's a very tough situation to be in, and my heart just goes out for all those affected by shootings, especially school shootings too. Like, it's just sad that that's the kind of world that we live in now.
It sounds to me like you have never personally had to deal with a school shooting, as I know, but you've had the emotional toll put upon you a few times based on lockdowns that are uncertain of, is it the real thing, and threats to your school. There's an emotional toll that whether or not you ever live through one, there's still an emotional toll with like having to be prepared for it and not being sure if this drill is the real thing or not. And I didn't have to do that. And most people in this country haven't had to do this, but it's this young generation that has, and I'd imagine that as it is doing, is going to elicit some different responses from your generation as you continue to move into adulthood and be in position to have influence on laws or just on other people's thinking. That your generation's different in all kinds of ways, I suppose, with different things happening. But that's one thing that you've all experienced and had to prepare for that we didn't. And how it impacted you will result in probably some changes as you all grow a little bit older.
Yeah, we can only hope. Because, like, I don't believe that guns should be banned, but I do believe there should be more protective measures taken place. Like, I just saw today that Pete Buttigieg had like a new plan that set forth for gun control, and like when I was reading through, I'm like, this could actually work, but will it ever happen? That kind of thing. I also was watching the Daily Show too, where he said that people talk about like after 9/11 they didn't ban airplanes, and like he was like, yeah, you're right, but like the there's like the TSA though, like he was kind of cracked a joke, like he's like, you have too much saliva in your mouth and we'll just tell you to spit it out, because like you can't have like you have to have certain sizes of liquids and stuff, which we experienced on the airport because both of my plagues going to New York got flagged for some reason. One was because apparently I had too much liquids, and then they took one container that probably, since I used that product a lot, like had less than 3.4 fluid ounces, but then they're just like, do you want to just throw it away? I'm like, yep. And then the other one, they're like, you had too much change, and I'm like, how is that something you should flag down and search my bag for? But they have a lot of safety measures, and I wish that was something that they could put forth for guns, because I know there are people who just want to use their guns for like sporting, like hunting and stuff, and like they're super safe with their like how they use their gun and they take the right measures and stuff, like. But then there's also the people who use the guns for harm, as we've seen recently with the recent shootings, like in El Paso and Dayton.
It's a difficult subject and another controversial subject, because I think we've hit on a few of those here in this conversation. And it's one that I understand people's perspectives. I really just try to listen to what people have to say. And I have a number of people in my life that are very responsible gun owners, and they have a great perspective on this. Like, they're doing everything right. Why should they be penalized in some way from what they're doing properly because someone else somewhere doesn't? And I can get that. That's fair. That's fair. And based on the current interpretation of the Second Amendment, they also have the right to have their guns. So I totally get that. And then on the other side, people that want gun control, want something to happen, want something to change, I totally get that too, because we should not accept, and it seems again like a few days after only, that we've accepted, 20 people get shot to death here, 20 people that were just out shopping die here, and the extended lives beyond that, they're traumatized. Like, that's in some way, if nothing changes ever, and it seems like nothing changes, mass shooting after mass shooting after mass shooting, maybe some minor thing here or there, but I don't really know if anything's happening besides, the bump stock thing related to the Las Vegas shooting. Basically, nothing changes. It makes me think that the people that are in position to make changes do not care. And whether or not they do care, and they probably feel like they do care, they don't want people to die. But if they're not changing anything, even if they change something and it doesn't work, and then change something else and it doesn't work, and change something, this actually seems to be working. The fact that things aren't changing is a concession that either we don't care, or we're not gonna try to do anything because we feel safe. I don't know what it is exactly, but even though someone has responsible gun ownership, at a certain point, I feel like maybe they just don't care that much if people are dying and they don't want their rights changed.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's very hard to think that some politicians do care with how they take measures against such things. Like, I saw this one post where it was like Mitch McConnell, there's been he's been in power for 2,000 some days, and there's been a huge number of shootings, and there's been bills that have been brought forth to his desk, and he just doesn't really pay any attention to them. So there's some politicians who you can tell are really trying to advocate for a change, and then there are some where you're just doubtful that they really care for issues like this. It's a very touchy subject, and it's a very hard subject to debate on. It's taken a while for me to try to form an opinion on it, because I know there are people who are very safe with their guns and their gun use. So I know for sure I don't want an altogether gun ban, because in cities like Chicago, where there's a gun ban, they have the highest per capita murders, I believe is what it is, in their city, and shootings when there's a gun ban in the city. So I know gun bans don't work in this country, at least, but I hope there's some sort of other measure taking place that could be effective.
There's so many guns within the confines of the borders of the United States of America that banning guns, I don't think, is an option. It's similar. Okay, yeah, you ban guns in Chicago. Well, there are neighboring suburbs in other states, say, for instance, and I don't know this for sure where the guns are coming from, but like Gary, Indiana has historically also had some crime issues there. Well, if there's not a gun ban there, and that is a 1 hour drive from Chicago, I don't think that a gun ban in a city really makes a difference. It's just, people are able to still, people that really want guns while guns exist are probably going to get them. Some of them are, where that you never going to stop everyone from getting a gun. But the fact that someone with maybe some mental illness challenges and maybe a history of something can walk into a gun show and get a gun very quickly or easily, or maybe walk into a Walmart or some place like that and get one relatively easily, where other places in the world it is a very difficult process. I just there's greater efforts, greater measures that could be taken so that people can still get guns if they seem to be of a mind that they would be responsible based on whatever criteria, but that criteria can be a little bit tighter. I don't see the urgency to need guns. If you have to wait a couple more days or a few more weeks and a few more people don't get them, I don't see how that's a bad thing. If that would like stop one mass shooting, who would disagree with that? If you would say, nope, I want my gun rights to be as they are right now, and I don't care how many more mass shootings there are. Okay, say that out loud, say those words so we know who you are, and then we can use that as a way to assess what we think of you and your position. But if you say, yeah, I can back down a little bit. If I get to keep my guns and it's just a little bit harder for me to get my next gun, but maybe some more people don't die, yeah, I can be on board with that. I don't see why that can't be the obvious solution. But I'm just one person that doesn't own a gun and has no intention of shooting a gun, so I don't know that my opinion counts for everybody. And I'm sure there's some flaws in my opinion too, because I'm human and I'm trying to grasp this myself. But I'd hope everyone recognizes the flaws in their thinking as well. If someone was to point out mine, I'd be happy if someone would point out the flaws in mine. Send an email, peopleiknowshow@gmail.com. Chloe, how about we get into the personal growth segment? And you have, as we've talked about, made some changes in your life. You've changed some of your thinking. What is it that you're specifically doing, would you say, that helps you grow as a person, and how can you describe that to an audience? What can you share about your personal growth?
Well, I think like one thing that's really helped me is that my parents are very open to me exploring different perspectives and changing my viewpoints on certain things, as long as I have like the facts to back it up to support my viewpoints. And so that's just been one way that has really helped me with that, to have like still that support to be able to change my viewpoints on certain things. Because as I've said before, is that I used to consider myself to be a Republican, and now I'm much more liberal leaning. And it's like there was a lot of thinking that went through that, because once I joined Model UN, and I was doing some stuff and like solving these, more real life issues, but they were in simulations. I realized that I wanted to help people more, and like a lot of the viewpoints that I had currently at that time contradicted what I wanted in order to help people. And so a lot of my viewpoints changed based off of my want to help people, especially people in need. So that was one huge driving factor, is that I want to just help people out and have their lives be changed for the better.
And I would say another thing about you, and you can describe if this has been a growth mechanism as well, but you have become more vocal, I think, in recent years. And the fact that you were in Model UN and just some of the things that you've talked about already in this conversation, how would you describe your growth leading to some of these areas? Maybe, or would you say you're more confident or you're more outspoken, or how would you describe all that?
I believe I'm more outspoken than what I used to be, and Model UN definitely helped me with that, because in order to do well and in order to succeed, is that you have to get your viewpoint out there and you have to get your ideas out there in order to do well in Model UN, especially at competitions.
And I think that'll serve you well going forward, just having that experience of putting your voice out there, and maybe even having this conversation with me today. I think there was a learning curve for me, like having ideas that I felt were good and then expressing them to a couple people and then being more confident and more outspoken to express them to more people. Because, sometimes I think as individuals who want to have an impact, and we're hopeful that the things that we've learned and the things that we feel like sharing can make an impact. But if you don't tell anyone besides maybe just a couple people or perhaps nobody, then no matter what you're thinking, what you believe, won't get very far. So I see that from you as you keep on moving on as someone that can be more outspoken and more effective communicating a message.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, but I'm really glad that I was given the freedom to change my differing viewpoints, and I was given that freedom to change in what I believe, because I know people, like some of my friends, where their parents don't really give them the room to change their points, their different points and their different views of what they have on certain issues. So that was one such privilege that I had with my parents in growing up.
And I think that is a huge asset to have, and I think you should be very grateful. And it sounds like you are very grateful to have that, because that'll allow you to continue down a path of changing and growing and then talking about whatever it is that you've learned. That seems like a good transition then into the being wrong segment. I know, Chloe, that we've talked about a lot of the ways that you've changed your mind, and I don't know if you would assess all of those as being wrong or some of them. Perhaps there's something we haven't talked about yet. Regardless, if you can encapsulate you looking back on your life and what you think you were wrong about and how you might want to share that with an audience here today of a message of being wrong and growing.
I used to think that I had to have this one set perspective, this one view at one point, because that's just kind of how I grew up as. But then I realized that I had the ability to change my mind on certain issues and to just have a different idea of what I believe the world should be as, and different ideas that I had politically wise and also religiously based too. And so that was one thing that I was wrong about. And also throughout high school too, there was, especially within the last year, there were friendships that I thought would really hold and really last, but then so what some people told me as a senior goodbye, they just kind of dived down and just dispersed away. And I'm glad at this point that happened, because now I'm more focused on other relationships, and I've developed more close, and I wouldn't say intimate, but just more personal relationships with people that I don't think that would happened if I was still friends with a few people that I was at the beginning of high school.
I think you'll continue to learn that lesson, Chloe, as you get into the university. Just the people that you surround yourself with, you're really going to be a lot like them, or they're going to rub off on you. You're going to rub off on them. And it's important to continue to meet people and search for the people that are the right fit for you, and help them and have them help you continue to grow, and maybe not get yourself in the wrong circles, the ones that really won't help your life move in the path that you want. So that's a lesson that seems like you learned, and just, the thinking, knowing that it's okay to change your thinking. So I don't know when I learned that, but at some point I felt more comfortable and confident knowing that I can change my mind. And that was a big realization about that it's okay to be wrong, and then to talk about that and perhaps influence other people. Any final thoughts, Chloe, before we wrap up this conversation?
Not any that come to mind. Thank you for having me on here.
Well, Chloe, thank you for joining me today, and it was a fun trip with you recently, and I look forward to watching you continue to grow here through your college years and beyond. Thank you, Chloe.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to People I Know Show. Links are in the show notes for the People I Know Show Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube accounts. Find plenty of content there related to this episode and to previous episodes. I like your reaction. Comment or post or connect with me on any of those social media sites. Review People I Know Show on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you might be able to do that. And lastly, I'd love to get your email, as mentioned during this episode. When covering controversial topics like this, I am not convinced that I know everything. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Interject on something that I said or something my guest says. Maybe the best way to reach out then is to send an email to me, Curt Carstensen, using the email address peopleiknowshow@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.